Uh, Thank you, Mr. Jones. Hello, everybody again. Again to those of you I've already seen today, but and I apologise to those already because there may be some repetition, but I'll try and keep it down to as little as possible. But welcome to all the new faces. Nice to see you all. So we thought this session I would try and quickly run through a few things that I do during a daily practice. For instance, warm up, what technique sort of stuff I work on. And some studies and things like that. But also, hopefully, if we get time, we might touch on some improvisation if we get enough time. I'm hoping we will. So basically, what I said before, what I was talking about earlier, was trying to make it as fun as possible playing our instruments, because it's the reason we chose to play, isn't it? Because we wanted to have as much fun as we could. We really love the sound that these instruments make. We love being able to make music together in ensembles and things. So we want to make it as fun as possible, and the best way to make it as fun as possible is to be really good. You always enjoy things that you're good at, and obviously if you want to be good, you've got to put some work in and practice. And I was talking earlier about how to try and make your practice as fun as possible. A lot of the stuff you have to do is very basic. It's like going back to almost, when you first start playing, it's very basic, but as soon as you get those basics drilled into you and they become second nature, then you can start concentrating on the really, really fun bits. And it's also trying to make those bits that may not seem as appealing more fun to you. So I was talking before about initially how I'd warm up my chops, as we call them. We talked about athletes and things. They don't just run onto a pitch or get straight onto a track and run 100 meters in 9 seconds. They warm up all their limbs and their muscles and things. And we have to do the same. It's the same thing. Otherwise, we might cause ourselves a mischief. So what I tend to do is I vibrate my lips. So I tend to just blow air through my lips without any instrument, with no mouthpiece, nothing. Just let it vibrate so that we get all the airflow and circulation around our chops. And that allows them to move a lot easier, and it allows us to be able to produce notes that sound a lot better. So first of all, if you want to have a quick go at that, I'll show you how to do it, but it's pretty straightforward. That's generally what I do. I literally do that for about 5 minutes before I start playing. And straight away, you'll notice, you'll feel a sensation, hopefully, that it starts tingling. You might get an itchy nose or something like that, or your ears or something like that. That's what usually happens to me. But yeah, usually drives the wife mad, because I'll walk around the house before I come out to my practice room, and I'll just start doing that at random moments while she's mid-conversation, and she'll get very upset with me. But that's a good excuse not to have to talk to her, I guess. But so I tend to try and do that before I play, and it gets everything moving nicely. So even in that, so now we're buzzing. I also talked earlier about breathing, and breathing is really, really important. The way that we breathe, the way we use the air that we breathe in. Basically, you can't blow out what you haven't breathed in, essentially. I know it sounds simple, but that is true. The air that we use is basically our petrol. It's like our fuel, isn't it, that we use to work our instruments, I guess. So the way we breathe is really vitally important, and the reason it's important is because we need to stay as relaxed as we possibly can. We want to cut out as much tension as possible. As soon as we start seeing tension anywhere, it's going to hinder our progress. We're going to hit a ceiling very quickly. We're not going to be able to move forward. So the way I like to breathe is, like, I think of it as almost like a backwards sigh, if you like. So, like I said before, there's probably a lot of people sighing at the moment, but if you just exhale that air like that, it's really, really relaxed, and then try and invert that, try and do that backwards. You'll feel your lungs fill up, and all the way around your back. You'll feel your chest rise a bit. But try not to get any tension in your shoulders. You don't want to block your throat. I often think of your windpipe and this part of our body as if you've got a hose on, and it's firing water out. Imagine when you step on that hose, which is essentially what you do if you start getting tense here, is you cut the water off, don't you? There's very little water comes out. So we want to try and keep our throat as open as possible. A lot of people say that they drop their tongue, so you could think of it like that. You think as if you're saying or open. If you say open loudly, you'll feel your throat open. And if you say closed, quietly, you'll feel it tense up. So that's what we want to try to avoid. So if ever we think you've got your throat's closing up, shout open, and feel what that sensation feels like. That's what we want to try and mimic. That's what we want to try and get into our subconscious, if you like. So if you want to just have a quick go at breathing, so I'm just going to take as relaxed breath as I can, and maybe I just blow out a nice, solid, sort of 5 to 10 second core of air. Okay, so I'm just going to go like this. I'm going to go. And just try and stay as relaxed as you can and keep that air nice and free and flowing. If you want to just have a quick go at that, go for it. So what we're trying to do at this point is we're trying to subconsciously put some habits into our psyche, I guess. That means it's going to keep us relaxed. It's not because we're going to get rid of all the tension, and that's going to become part of us. It's going to become part of our playing. It's really important. So then you can take that onto buzzing. Now, I still want you to have that same sensation. I said earlier that sometimes I use this technique. I just put my fingers on my lips as if it's a mouthpiece and do the same thing. I breathe, but then just blow through where a mouthpiece would be, but in the same sort of relaxed way. So I'd go. So by adding part by part, a different bit at a time, you're gradually sort of building up to picking up the mouthpiece, picking up the trumpet, but still keeping those same essentials going. So if you want to just have a quick go at that, take a nice big breath and just air. That's all we want to hear is air. So then we get on to making a sound. So sometimes I would buzz my lips, but I don't find that as useful as using a mouthpiece, or because you're not. It gets very tiring after a while, and I tend to find it doesn't work all the right muscles, and it does tire you out. But it is good to get the muscles and the vibration working for your chops. I do find that useful for that. So again, moving on another step, we could just go. Try and get a nice focused sound again. It's all about trying to make the best sound that you can at all times, no matter what you're doing. So just try that, just have a nice little buzz. Try not to be too tense. Again, like I said, just try and make it as relaxed as possible. Keep the air flowing at all times. Like I just mentioned, it's really key to try and make the best sound that you can every single time you pick up your instrument. Because as soon as you forget that, that's when we're practicing bad habits. That's when the bad habits start. So now we can take a mouthpiece. We'll do a quick mouthpiece blow. So we'll play just one long note on our mouthpiece. Same thing, same drill, same breathing, same blowing, keeping that airflow going. We're aiming for a nice, solid, centered note. So. Okay, so just have a go at that. Just blow us a nice long note. Great. Now I always like to think of it as if I was a singer. So we're talking about now. We're going to talk about moving pitches of the notes. So obviously moving up and down. Now, if you notice when you're talking or when you're singing and you use different vowels. So, for instance, A, E, I, O, U. You notice that your tongue makes different shapes in your mouth. So, a little technique that I do sometimes is just to program into my brain what that feels like. The sensation. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get into good habits and trying to program these sensations into our psyche. Because the thing is, I can't tell you how it feels for you. I know how it feels for me, but you've got to do this so that you get that feeling in your brain. So it becomes habit, you know. So what I want you to do is just go ta e ya e ya e ya. Singing is a really, really great way of getting these drills into your brain without because I find a lot of the time, as soon as you pick up a mouthpiece or a trumpet, you forget about everything. And all you're worrying about is just, how do I make a noise? How do I get the noise out of the trumpet? What valve am I pressing? You forget about all the basics. So what I'm trying to get through at the moment is these fundamental things that are really going to improve the sound that you make, first of all, pretty quickly if you keep it up. So just for now, just have a little go at that. Don't worry, I can't hear you singing, so it's fine. Sing as loudly as you like. Ah, ee, ah, ee, ah, ee. Can you notice what's happening with your tongue? You can feel the tongue moving up and down and up and down. So that same sensation is what we want to feel when we're altering our notes, especially on the mouthpiece, but also when we pick up the trumpet. So just try that now. Pick up your mouthpiece. I want you to breathe in the same way, blow out the same way, but this time just think and say in your head, ta, ee, ah, ee. And notice how it feels and how it sounds. Okay, now of course this is just literally like the tip of the iceberg. You can take these drills on forever if you want. You can extend them. You can go through all lots of different keys, you know, to extend your range. The good thing that somebody told me once is when you're warming up, always warm up to the range that you want to be playing in. Don't just warm up and just do, like, say, C to G and go, oh, that's it, I'm warmed up. And then try and pick up a piece and play a top C, because you won't be prepared for it, you won't be ready. So always when you're warming up, warm up to the range that you want to be playing in for the rest of the day. So that was a really good tip that I got once. So when we're on the subject of sound, I know I said it earlier on for those of you that were here, it's really crucial to have an idea in your head of what sound you want to make, and the only way that you can get that is by listening. And so I'd strongly advise listening to as many different trumpet players, any instrumentalists, singers, and when you're listening, but really, really listen, because listening is another form of practicing. Basically, if you listen properly, it's another form of practice. So you can listen to it and you can identify what bits of it you like, what bits of it you don't like, and why. You can think, well, he's using loads and loads of vibrato. I don't really like that, so that's not what I want to use for that, for my sound. Then you'll notice someone else playing something that sounds beautiful and lyrical and effortless and just glides around. You think, well, I want to sound like that. It sounds amazing. I said earlier, when I was younger, the jazz player was Wynton Marsalis, and the classical player that I really loved listening to was Maurice Murphy, because he played on all the Star Wars films and things. I think he just made an amazing sound. But then other instrumentalists and things are also useful. Harry Connick, for instance, I love the way he sang. So I tried to phrase things the way he sang a phrase, you know, for instance. So it's just little things like that. It's well worth listening to as much as possible. I know you can't go out and listen to concerts at the moment, but there's obviously so much that you can listen to that's online, or CDs that you've got, or MP3s of whatever. There's tons of it around that you can listen to. But really listen to it properly, that's what I'd say. So another technique that I use sometimes, just to check that the air feels the way that I want it to, is I pick up a trumpet without the mouthpiece and just blow air through the trumpet, breathing in the same way but blowing air through the trumpet, and it feels so free. That's what you want to try and emulate, that really lovely free feeling of the air just flowing straight through the instrument. So just do that for me once, taking in the same breath, nice big relaxed breath, and just blow through the trumpet. Another thing that I used to try and program that feeling into my brain was blowing through a straw into a glass of water and trying to keep the bubbles going in the water. And that the straw, because there's no resistance in a straw, is there? You're just blowing all the time. If ever I'm struggling with anything like high register or anything like that, all I'm thinking about is the way that I'm blowing. That's all I think about. I don't think about, is my tongue doing this and my chops doing that? What should I be doing with my diaphragm? I always just go back to thinking about how I'm blowing through the instrument, and everything else just sort of works itself out, because with this, that is the absolute fundamental, is how we use our air properly. So moving on to play the trumpet. So take all those things that we've just done already. Like I said, this is really brief. I've got tons of books and things like that I can show you and stuff. So maybe if you're interested and wants a copy of a few of these things, you can talk to Mr. Jones. I can perhaps send a photocopy of a few of the sheets and things. But let us know. So again, still on fundamentals. Let's try and make the best sound that we can on our instruments. Again, just using all those same things. Just playing the middle G. Just try and make a really gorgeous centered sound, solid sound. So. Just have a go at that, and really just think about your sound. Think about what sound you'd like it to sound like. What are you aiming for? You've got to have goals and aims, otherwise you won't know where to go. And of course, again, you can extend when you're doing a proper warm up. You'd extend these up and down chromatically. I usually move on to things like this next warm up that I played earlier on. So it goes like this warm up, but this is the sort of thing that I find useful anyway. So I'm always thinking about how would I like to hear that played? How would I like it? How would I like to sing it? If I was any good at singing, how would I like to hear it sung? So again, the tongue is moving as if I was singing, but I'm still just blowing as if I'm playing one long note. I'm trying to keep it as free as I possibly can. Trying to keep it open and relaxed as I possibly can. And these exercises are really good for really drilling that home. So moving on from those. You might know, I don't know whether you can see, no, you can't see from there, but you're moving on to like things like scales and stuff like that. So there's a scaling thing that goes along with these warm-ups that I tend to do quite a lot. And this is now bringing in tonguing into warming up. But again, I'm trying to keep the tongue as out of the way as possible, basically. I don't want it to interrupt what's happening with my air. So the tongue tends to, I find quite a lot, tends to bring in a lot of tension, because all of a sudden we're thinking differently, aren't we? Because all of a sudden we've got a tongue to deal with. But what I want us to think about is just keeping that air flowing, and all that tongue is doing is just flapping here every now and again. It's not hitting anything, it's not stopping the air, it's just touching it. So we try and get something that's still, the air's still flowing, so we can still get that nice natural sound. So we go. So I'm desperately trying not to stop and start every note. I'm trying to still blow the same way that we'd be blowing as if we were playing a long note. It's just all about trying to create the nicest sound that you can and keep things as simple as possible. So again, these exercises go on for pages and pages and pages in different keys and things like that. Like I mentioned before, because I prefer to play jazz music, I really like all that that style of music. I tend to change it up a bit. I like to change the rhythms. So when we're tonguing, I tend to start thinking about how would I play that if I saw that written down as in a jazz piece, in a big band chart or something like that. How would I phrase that? How would I play it? So I would then try to swing the quavers, try and make them swing as much as I possibly could. I also get a metronome out. It's really great technique to use to practice along with the metronome. It really drills home that sense of time for you. So I've just got, you can get an app for it on your phone. I always just get it along. For jazz things, I try and think of it on 2 and 4 as well. Da, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. But for now, I'm just going to use it as keeping me in time to play it. Da, 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 da. So then I'd maybe half that. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. So just by putting a click on 2 and 4, but playing it still straight, it immediately feels completely different. So you're now in a sort of a jazz way of thinking about how this phrase goes, and then you can start swinging them. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So I find that really useful, and it makes these exercises a little bit more interesting. It sort of gears it more towards the sort of playing that I like to do. So that's a really, really great thing to have. Have a little metronome. I think it's free. It's a free app, I think, if you haven't got one already. But yeah, just set it on beats 2 and 4, and then just try and play simple little warm-up exercises, and try and swing them, play them in different styles. But don't forget the fundamentals. We want to keep those good habits coming. Try and get rid of all the bad habits if we possibly can. Right. That's a very quick way through of talking through how I do my initial warm-ups. There are other studies and things like that I use. I've got tons and tons of books here, lots of advanced lip flexibilities and things like that. But like I was saying earlier, you'll find that some of them suit you more than others, but you have to try them all, basically. Like I was saying before, I had a teacher once that used to try and get me to do 4 hours of just mouthpiece drills every day, and that didn't really suit me down to the ground. It might suit one of you, but it didn't suit me. So, but I tried it, and it wasn't really for me. So I now tailor my warm-ups and things like that to things that suit my playing, my style of playing, I guess, the way I want to play. So it's always good to have this toolbox of books and things, because as soon as something starts going wrong. So, for instance, if you're struggling with your fingering one day, if they feel really sluggish, you can get out the Clark books, and now you can go through all the really nasty keys, and work on those nice and slowly, gradually build up the tempo with the metronome, along with the metronome, and this will also help. Once you put in these through all the 12 keys, this will also help with your jazz improvisation. Those of you that are interested in it, are all of you here with a sign of a wave? Have you all done some improvising before? Anyone done some improvising? Okay, a few of you. Good. Now there's always certain keys that we prefer to play in, isn't there? Because they're easier for us, because they're the first things we learn. So if we learn a C scale, for instance, if there's a blues in that key, then we're happy as Larry. We can play along to that. We can play up and down the blues scale until it changes into a different key, and then we're stumped. So that's where all these fingerings and things like that, all these different techniques come in really handy, because it's all about training your brain and it's brain. I'm trying to think of what it is. Brain training. It's not brain training, is it? It's trying to program into your fingers what it feels like, the sensation feels like. And you'll find once you start improvising in these different keys that it will be a lot easier, because you'll recognize, oh yeah, my fingers are used to doing that now. So it's worth doing. So just to touch on improvising while we're here, again, like I said before, when you find out somebody whose sound you like, go and listen to them as much as possible. Listening in, especially when it comes to improvising, is a massive thing. I find it's very, very difficult to try and teach someone how to swing and it sound natural. And the only way that you can swing properly is by hearing it and practicing it and feeling it. It's a feeling more than anything. You've really got to have it ingrained in you. So what I tend to do quite a lot is I tend to play along to a lot of records and CDs of old jazz recordings and things, especially, obviously tunes that I really like, but transcribing some solos. So I remember, I think the very first solo that I transcribed was the Lee Morgan solo off of Sidewinder. And as soon as you learn that and you You notice all the little inflections that they do, the way they bend certain notes. And then you start questioning, I wonder why he played that note there, why he played this note there. And once you've even got sort of 8 bars, if you then start taking it away and putting that through all 12 keys, it will become, all of a sudden you own it. It becomes part of your language. You've noticed a part that you really like. You've taken it on, you've evolved it, and it's now part of your vocabulary. And so I think listening and transcribing, has anybody done any transcribing before? So they would know what to transcribe. You'd listen and you copy. You can either write it down or do it by ear. It's a really, really good thing to do, because if you're doing it by ear, especially, it's just training your brain to put the notes that you're hearing in your head onto your instrument. I found that one of the most difficult things for me improvising is transferring what I'm hearing in my head, what I want to play, ideally, onto my instrument. So if you find you're sitting there and you're listening to something and you start singing along, you start singing a great solo over the top of it, and that's all in your head, you think, wow, that sounded amazing if I could put that on my trumpet. And you pick up the trumpet and you don't even know what key it's in. So it's a really great thing to do, just to sit there and play along to the record, because then you'll recognize sounds. When you're playing with a rhythm section, you'll then hear a chord that you'll recognize, or a sound that you'll recognize from off some of those records, and you'll know exactly, you'll be able to pick those notes out. It will. It's a strange thing that happens, but it does. It comes out. It's like learning a new language, I guess. Well, it's exactly what it is. It's like learning a new language. It's vital to start off with baby steps, but you only learn a new language by copying. I mean, I've got a 18-month-old daughter at home, and she's babbling away. But you can see when you're talking to her, she's desperately trying to copy the way you move your lips, and the way she's experimenting with sounds with her tongue and all that sort of stuff. So, and that's essentially the same thing when we start playing jazz. It's a new language, so we have to experiment, we have to listen and try and copy, and then try and adapt it to us. None of us speak the same either, but yet we've all been taught the same words, more or less. So it's a similar sort of thing to that. So I would say initially, listen to as many different players, not just your own instrument players either. Lots and lots of different players, and listen properly, like I was saying before, and really, really take on board why you like a certain thing, why you don't like a certain thing. Because if you really don't like something, you want to know how to avoid it, don't you? Basically. But if you really like something, then copy it. Take it on as your own. It might even be just a tiny little phrase, but think, wow, that sounds really great. I'll copy that, and I'll try and learn that, and now I'll put it through lots of different keys. I'll move it up a semitone, down a semitone, keep going all the way through. And then the next time you hear a chord that sounds like that in a band, you'll think, I've got that, I can play that. It's great. I promise you it happens. Now, the thing that confused me and was my biggest kind of stumbling block when I started improvising was actually physically looking and trying to interpret what those signs and letters all meant. And it kind of set me back a little bit, because I was getting too bogged down about thinking about, oh God, what scale do I play over that? And again, it's all about going right back to basics. And there's a fantastic book. This book I've got here, actually. It's called Jazz Theory Book by Mark Levine, and it starts off really, really in a real basic way. It literally gets you to imagine, to picture, say, a C scale, and just imagine playing that C scale up and down, but starting on a different note. So you play up and down, and listening to the sound that scale makes. So you play a normal sort of C scale. So then we'll play a C scale, but starting on a D instead. So automatically now it's got a different sound to it. So it's basically going through all the modes. I don't know whether you've gone through modes and things like that, but this was the simplest way that kind of really connected with me. Okay, and so on and so on. Now, when these chords, what they do when they're written down on a page like that, basically they're just describing the sound that they make, obviously, whether they're major or minor, and if we're talking basically whether there's a dominant seventh or a major seven, basically, and that's all we're going to cover. So if you see, obviously C major is a C sometimes with a triangle or just a C, and that's what we've just played there, C up and down. Now the chord that's used is just a third and a fifth, isn't it? So you've got C, E, and G. So if you move up a step to D and you take the C major scale starting on a D, and you do the same thing, you take the third and the fifth, you've got an F natural and an A. So that's a minor third, a D and an F natural and an A. Now you've got a minor 7 chord. So you've got, which is essentially a C major scale, but starting on a D. So when you see something when you see like a D minor 7 on a page now, essentially it's a C major scale, but starting on a D. We can all play a C major scale, but now we just start it at a different point on the scale. Now that kind of blew me away a bit, because there's loads of scales like that. So what happens a lot in jazz music is a thing called a 2-5-1 chord progression. Has anyone heard of that before with a wave? Yeah, okay, a few of you. So if you carry on up the scales like that, so we're talking now. So I talked about the C major scale starting on a C. That's your chord 1. That's the bass chord. That D to D that we just played there, C major starting on a D, that's chord 2, and it goes up progressively like that. So when we get to chord 5, that's essentially a C major scale, but starting on a G. So if we built it up in the same way that we built up the other chords, you'd have a G, a B, a D, and an F natural at the top, wouldn't you? Because it's in the key of C major. And that is a G7 chord. It's a dominant 7th. That F makes that a dominant 7th chord. You all with me? So now we know if we see a G7 on a page, it relates to C major 7. It's a C major chord, C major scale starting on a G. So now we know if we see D minor 7, G7, C major, we can play C major through all of that straight away. Just one scale we can play up and down C major, and that obviously works through every key. There's a lot of tunes that use 2-5-1s all over the place. The one that I use when I'm warming up, I use a tune called Just Friends. Now that's a really, really great one to use for 2-5-1s, because I've got it open here, and essentially every single part of it is basically 2-5-1s, but in different keys, if you like. So it starts off in D major. Oh, this is in concert pitch, that's why it's confusing me. So it starts in C major in concert pitch. And then you have C minor 7, F7. So what would that relate to, do you think? It would, C minor 7 is the chord 2 of which scale? That would be a B flat. So it'd be B flat major. Are you with me? Smile if you're with me. I know it's getting a bit in depth, but once you get your head around this bit, it's a really basic thing to get into your head. And as soon as you recognise these, any kind of minor 7 chord followed by a dominant 7 chord, you've got a scale that you can use straight away, and that opens up so many doors. So long as you know that scale, obviously. You need to know that scale, but as long as you know that scale, then it opens up loads. Because I was often thinking about, right, what note am I going to play for a D minor 7? Right, what note am I going to play for a G7? Now what am I going to play for this? And all of a sudden, there's suddenly passages where all you need to know, for instance, for this, all you need to know is 4 scales. But it's just knowing where to use them. And as soon as you see that and it opens up these things, it's, well, all of a sudden now, all those chord symbols aren't going to confuse me as much anymore, because essentially all I need to know is 4 different scales. It's as simple as that. So that's worth looking at. For homework, I'd look at things like Just Friends or All the Things You Are, and go through it with a pencil. And every time you see minor 7, so a dash and a 7 next to a chord, you know it's the second chord, the second scale of the major chord below it. Are you with me? So if you see a D with a minor 7, you know it's C major, but starting on a D. And you can go through no end of it. It's really surprising the amount of jazz tunes that you go through, and that's used over and over and over again, and it opens up loads of different things. It just means that you're free, a bit freer. Instead of just thinking about one bar, you've got 5 bars all of a sudden that have opened up. So it's definitely worth trying. Anyway, I could play an example of just running up and down scales, but I'm not sure if you'd hear it properly on my computer. I can play. Shall I just have a quick toggle through Just Friends and see if you can hear it? So I've got a thing called an iRealbook. I don't know whether you've heard of that, but it's an app that you can get for your computer, and it's got all the Realbook tunes on it basically, and with a live rhythm section that you can play along to. And this is what I use. See if this will work. My speakers have turned themselves off. They just turned themselves back on now. Okay, can you hear that with the wave? Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to play the scales, sort of really basic scales up and down from the beginning. Okay, here we go. I don't know whether it's what it sounded like, but it's basically that's just going through and playing simple scales up and down and hearing what they sound like and how they fit over those chords. I mean, it looks, when you look at the part, there's so many chords on there. If you were just to look at that, it would completely bamboozle you. But there's so many 2-5-1s that immediately you look at it and you think, okay, well, there's 4 bars there where I can just play an A major scale. There's another 4 bars where I just need to know my B flat scale. You know, it's simple things like that. There's loads of little sort of sneaky little treasures that you can, or little tricks that you can use that, well, not tricks, but it's just the way that it is to work out things like that. But like I say, that was the big thing for me. I mean, it's when you're sat there in a big band and you see all these funny squiggles staring at you, and somebody points at you, somebody nasty like Mr. Jones points at you and says, play a solo. Then, then hopefully you might be able to understand a few little things. If there's things like silly squiggles like sharp 13 or, you know, flat this, sharp that, ignore those for now. Just take on the big letter, and whether it's major or minor, and you're off to a winner. Honestly, just try and make it as simple as possible, but always making a nice sound, of course.
Thanks, Russ. I'm aware we're getting a bit short of time, and I don't want to keep Russell on till midnight. Obviously, he's touched on the basics there of getting warmed up and how important that is, and also on the improvisation part of things. I think the main message there is give it a try. Don't be scared of it. And as Russell said, always simplify it back down to its simplest key. Is there any questions? If you have a question, which I hope some of you do, because this is interactive, please just unmute yourself. And then if you ask the question, and I'm sure Russell would be happy to stay on for a moment or two and answer a couple of questions if there are any.
I know it might have been a bit rushed because it's quite difficult to fit everything in 40 minutes. So I hope I haven't completely confused everybody, but
yeah, I don't think so. Yes, are you coming for a question? Are you unmuting?
Who's
I
that?
can see you speaking.
Who?
Jessel?
There we go. Can you hear me?
We can now. Yeah.
how you doing?
I was wanting to ask, hi. If you're warming up, do you tend to warm up for a set amount of time, or do you warm up just to be able to play what you want to play?
That's a good question. Like I said before, I'm not sure whether I mentioned it in this workshop. I think I did, but I tend to warm up to the range that I want to be playing in. Depends what I'm going to be playing for the rest of my practice and stuff. But I definitely would warm up to that range for a start. I'd probably take more time over the very first bit of my warm up. So getting my chops working and things like that, I'd definitely spend more time on that. But it can, like I've said before, it can vary because some days some days it can feel fine lip flexibility wise, and I won't need to work on as many of those. But then I'd want to work on more of my tonguing, and also to vary it up so it doesn't get boring. I don't have a set sort of routine. I tend to try and vary it up so it doesn't get boring. So I will do more of one thing one day and more of one thing another. But also it depends. Obviously, it's not the case at the moment, but it depends if I'm working, what I've got to work for in the evenings or something like that. So if I've got a heavy gig in the evening, I'll tend to just do basics. I won't tend to touch on anything too strenuous. I'll just get my chops sorted so it feels nice and ready for the evening, if you like. But in general, if you haven't got a gig or anything like that in the evening, I'd warm up until it all feels like it's working nicely. That's all I can say, and only you can really know that. I mean, first of all, to find out when it's working nicely, do it for I don't know, an hour or so, and then see how it feels. But I'd also say it's really important to take as much time off as it is on, if you like. So I'd always do half an hour, 45-minute warm up or something like that, and then take a little break, give you a chance for chops to recover a little bit, and then come back and do a bit more, do another half an hour, 45 minutes. But I'd say initially you'd definitely spend 45 minutes to an hour warming up. I'd say maybe. But everyone's different, so it's how it feels really.
I think some of them won't practice for 45 minutes to an hour.
Well, if you practice for 20 minutes, it's better than nothing. So just practice for 20 minutes and then put it down for 20 minutes and then go back to it. A little trick I do, I tend to leave instruments out everywhere, and you're more tempted to pick them up and just have a little tootle. I find the most difficult thing on most days is actually physically getting it out of the box, dragging myself over to the case and actually getting it out. So I've kind of took that element out of it, and leave them out everywhere. Again, that's another thing the wife likes, just trumpets and flugelhorns all over the house everywhere. But I find that's really good, because then you'll just think, because sometimes you'll be sat in one room and you'll go, oh, look, I fancy a bit of a, no, it doesn't matter. No, I'll just go and have a sandwich instead. But if you've got it there, if it's just sort of lying next to you, you just pick it up and then you blow a couple of notes. You think, oh, yeah, that feels good. And then that will lead on to a longer practice. Obviously, always be aware of where you've left it. I'm not going to come back with lots of complaints of kicked over instruments and dented instruments. But that's
any more questions, anyone? Thanks, Russ.
Yeah, thanks.
Is that okay, Jess?
Yeah, thanks.
Any more questions? I have to scroll through to look at people. So if you want to unmute yourself. I don't know if Mr. Sharp, Mr. Bull or Mr. Lancaster, if you would like to ask anything on behalf of your pupils either, and then feel free to.
I have a question.
Great.
So what kind of trumpeters and kind of music do you recommend listening to then, if you want to get into sort of improvisation?
Improvisation. Well, I mean, there's such a massive scope of that just within improvisation itself. I mean, you can go down loads of different routes. There's modern improvisation. There's old school bebop and things like that. I mean, I would go right back to the beginning and listen to them all. You go back to Bix Beiderbecke and Louis Armstrong and people like that, and move up through the ages. Your Clifford Browns, your Miles Davis. What I would recommend doing is going right back to the start and listening progressively to say one person from each era, one tune, one person from each era as you go along, and then you'll get an idea of what sort of style of music that you like, or style of improvisation you like, and then go back to the beginning again and listen to somebody else from that era and do it all again and keep going and then find a favourite.
Do you have any favourites?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I've got millions of favourites. That's the trouble. It's often difficult to narrow them all down. I mean, that's the other great thing about it. There's so much variation out there that when you're listening to all these different things, you can take tiny bits of each person's playing and put it into your own, and then it molds your own unique sort of sound, if you like. That's what's so good about it. I mean, I listened a lot to Clifford Brown. I mean, his technique and the way he forms phrases, and it's just so effortless. And you can just tell he knows the instrument back to front. He can fly around in any key, and he's just telling a story every time he plays a solo. So I'd strongly recommend listening to him for a start anyway. But I was fixated on him for quite some time. But I mean, I could be here for hours telling you all the different jazz players that I listen to. I mean, just in here, I mean, you look at, I mean, I'm school. Obviously, I've got CDs, but I've got about 5 or 6 different CD racks, you know, all full of all my favourite jazz musicians. You know, you've got to just listen to as much as possible and you know, form your own opinion. That's the other beauty of it, really. It's all about, it's so personal, and it's, you know, you've got the opportunity to form it yourself. You know, no one's going to tell you this is the way you have to do this. It's up to you what you like, and then you can form it yourself. That's what we love about it.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Dylan, do you have Netflix?
I don't know.
Okay, well, the reason I mention it is just the other day I watched something on Netflix called I Called Him Morgan, which is about Lee Morgan, the great jazz trumpet player, similar to Clifford Brown in my view, and it's a fantastic documentary. So for anyone who has Netflix, it's got an interesting story about how his wife shot him and killed him as well. So it's not just about music, but really interesting. Lee Morgan, and it's called I Called Him Morgan. If you have Netflix, give that a watch. We are coming to time. Any more questions just before we wrap up? No? Okay, well, in that case, it just comes to me to once again just thank Simpsa first for sponsoring this, and to thank Russell. I think the 2 big things I'm taking away from this is to listen. To listen, you know, and I know myself, Mr. Bull, Lancaster, Mr. Sharp have all told you, listen to music. The more you listen, the better you'll become. And as Russell said, listening is a way of practicing. So what a great way of practicing as well. And one other thing is to get your instrument out, especially during this time when we can't see you week in, week out as teachers. Get your instruments out and just play them and enjoy playing. You know, it's so important. Hopefully Russell's given you inspiration today to give some new things to try. What I'll do as well, I've made notes as we've gone through, so I'll write down these notes, and when I get a moment in the next few days, I'll send them all out to everybody who's been in part of the workshops as well, including some of the books and some of the listening that Russell's mentioned. So get those instruments out, get playing. Hopefully it won't be too long before we see you all again. But just before we do go, can we say a big thank you to Russell? I suggest we do that by a big wave, seeing we can't hear each other. So say thank you to Russell.
Cheers, guys. Thank you. Well done.
Thanks very much, everybody. Stay safe. We hope to see you all soon. Bye for now.
Yeah, bye.